to disrupt the vaccination program around the rest of the country.
While Sydney's COVID crisis deepens with 136 new cases and more restrictions for parts of the city's west. Also, a Gold Coast theme park declared an exposure site as authorities urge caution. And after a year's delay, the time has finally arrived. The Tokyo Olympics set to get underway tonight. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Eliza Harvey. The states have rejected a plea to redirect in-demand Pfizer supplies to New South Wales. As the COVID crisis in Sydney worsens, the Premier made the appeal before National Cabinet, declaring it a national emergency. The Prime Minister is now scrambling to secure extra doses, while strongly encouraging anyone in a hotspot to consider getting the widely available AstraZeneca jab. Here's political reporter Jane Norman.
Day after day, the COVID crisis only deepens.
We did have 110 cases, 124. We had 136 cases of local transmission.
The most populous state losing the fight against the highly virulent Delta strain.
The situation that exists now in New South Wales is regarded as a national emergency.
And the Premier's calling for a national solution.
We believe very strongly that we need to refocus the national strategy on vaccine rollout.
A plea for other states to give up their Pfizer supplies swiftly rejected.
I'm not wanting to send any of our vaccination doses anywhere else.
I understand their problem, but we're not prepared to give our Pfizer over.
We have barely enough vaccine allocated to any of us.
The Premier, who presided over the longest lockdown yet, firm in his view.
Sydney is on fire with this virus, and we need a ring of steel put around Sydney.
There's nothing light about the lockdown in Sydney.
But National Cabinet isn't coming to the rescue. Instead, the state will extend the interval between first and second Pfizer doses to get more people at least partially protected.
Where there is a potential to put more vaccines into New South Wales, well, of course, we will seek to do that. But we are not going to disrupt the vaccination program around the rest of the country.
For now, Pfizer supplies are fully allocated.
At the moment, we don't have surplus Pfizer.
But the country's awash with the locally made alternative.
We need to correct the mythology about AstraZeneca. I just can't understand why people would not be taking the opportunity to go out and get AstraZeneca in droves.
It's recommended for over 60s, but available to anyone who wants it.
It may be time for clear advice to all young Australians in Sydney that AZ is a very safe and effective vaccine.
We've got a fully blown national emergency on our hands because Scott Morrison failed to secure enough vaccines.
The Prime Minister's hinting that more Pfizer supplies might be secured. From where, though, it's not clear. With 15% of the eligible population now fully vaccinated, the rollout's running months behind schedule. But the Health Department boss has suggested the Delta strain is so infectious that half the country might still be in lockdown, even if more people were vaccinated.
I don't think that's an opinion. I think it's a fact. That's the lived experience of countries all around the world who do have higher rates of vaccination.
Cold's comfort to the millions of Australians in lockdown. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
More suburbs in Sydney's west are facing tightened restrictions as the city's outbreak worsens. Residents in the hardest hit suburbs are being urged to get vaccinated, as Kathleen Calderwood reports.
Another day, another suburb on alert. The streets of Blacktown will soon be even quieter.
I think it's all right. People have to don't leave the area. Yes, because it's gonna put the virus everywhere.
Now we're only living off one paycheck, so that's, back in Centrelink again.
Only authorised workers from Blacktown and Cumberland will be allowed to leave the council areas. That includes supermarket and pharmacy staff, emergency, health and aged care workers, and those employed in manufacturing and transport.
We need to up the ante. All of us need to be much more disciplined in dealing with this pandemic, dealing with this plague. And I would urge everybody to go and get vaccinated ASAP.
We also need to work very closely with the impacted communities and leave no stone unturned in terms of the support we can provide people.
Community leaders say that help can come in a variety of ways.
Community needs a lot of practical support to start with. Digital access remains a barrier where large numbers of family members have to share small spaces.
Not only is Blacktown the biggest council in the state, it's incredibly diverse. More than 180 languages are spoken here.
There seems also to be a lack of trust in central systems and information, so people are turning to their local trusted community leaders.
The answer to the issue for all of us, we need to get that message across to our diverse communities that COVID is a killer.
An urgent challenge for leaders at every level. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews says the state's case numbers are very encouraging, but it's too early to decide whether restrictions will be eased on Tuesday night. For those out of work and struggling businesses, the lifting of the lockdown can't come soon enough.
Jade Duffy's dance studio is usually full, but the music has gone quiet over the past 18 months.
We've lost 3 productions, which is it's a big thing for us.
Her business is among the thousands in Victoria hit hard during the pandemic. But after months of bad news, an act of kindness has turned things around.
My students have set up a fundraiser for me and they've raised $13,000.
It's just a really amazing community and I really hope she feels big love from all of us.
I'm just so proud of them all and so grateful.
When businesses can open again will depend on whether the state's 5th lockdown will be lifted on time.
It's very difficult for us today on Friday to be able to predict what will happen next Tuesday at midnight, but I would say that the trend is with us. These results are very encouraging.
One person who works at Casey Hospital tested positive, sending 40 other staff into isolation. There are still more than 400 exposure sites, including this apartment complex in Richmond, listed as a Tier 2 location. Authorities are continuing to chase down people who may have been exposed to the virus at the Prahran market over the weekend.
I expect that we'll get good coverage of those results over the next 24 hours.
With so many businesses closed, more than 25,000 Victorians rushed to apply for the federal government's COVID-19 disaster payments when they opened today. Between $375 and $600 a week will be provided to those who've lost work.
The gruelling reality is that for the people who have the least, many of them are excluded from the disaster relief payments.
The end of this lockdown might be in sight, but the next few days will be critical. Christian Silva, ABC News, Melbourne.
Returning to our top story now, and Cayman Gok is live for us at the mass vaccination hub in Sydney's Olympic Park. Cayman, good evening. The Prime Minister made it clear this afternoon we won't be getting other states' doses, but is there another solution?
There is, Eliza, and that's by increasing the time between Pfizer doses from 3 weeks to 6 weeks, which is within the health guidelines. Now, what that does is it gives authorities more time and supplies to administer first doses, and it's desperately needed too. Take a look at the queues out here at Sydney Olympic Park today. People have come in droves to get vaccinated, and the state government only wants those numbers to grow. Now, the Prime Minister did flag that if there are future opportunities to give extra doses to New South Wales, the federal government would do so, but it's unlikely to be a significant amount. Eliza?
Reporter Cayman Gok, thank you very much. Queensland authorities are scrambling to track down hundreds of passengers who flew on the same plane as a COVID-infected flight attendant more than a week ago. The woman in her 30s crewed 6 regional flights from Brisbane to Gladstone, Longreach and Hervey Bay. Now, one of southeast Queensland's biggest tourist attractions, Dreamworld, has been listed as a site.
She has the Delta variant, and it is exactly the same as around 60 Delta variants that have been loaded up on the public database. They're all the New South Wales cluster.
The Queensland border is now shut to New South Wales indefinitely. Australian regulators have given the go-ahead for 12 to 15-year-olds to receive the Pfizer vaccine, but doctors say it's not likely to be offered widely to that age group yet. Instead, young teens with compromised immune systems are likely to be at the front of the queue. Medical reporter Sophie Scott has the story.
Since the start of the pandemic, kids have been tested for COVID. Soon they could also be vaccinated.
With the implications for school closures, it's really a welcome that now we're going to be considering vaccinating children.
With outbreaks of the Delta variant flaring up, vaccinating as many people as possible is now the priority.
Delta is different and it's really affecting young people. It's becoming pretty clear from some of the studies overseas that there may be a 2 to 3-fold increase in hospitalisation with this particular strain.
Done! So brave! Young people in countries such as the US, UK and Canada can already get a COVID vaccine. Trials have shown the Pfizer vaccine is 100% effective in protecting younger teens from infection. Authorities are monitoring rare cases of treatable heart inflammation, which showed up in some young men.
We can be really reassured that the TGA has done its job and ensured that the vaccine is safe for our 12 to 15-year-olds.
But just because it's been approved doesn't mean children will get the jab soon. Authorities are likely to prioritise the vaccine for young teens with compromised immune systems or those with chronic health problems. Healthy kids could then join the queue behind older people and people over 20.
They are still very important groups for us to consider, especially young people under 40 who are socially immobile and able to transmit COVID.
It's now up to the government's immunisation advisors to decide how and when younger people get the Pfizer vaccine. That advice could be out as soon as next week. Sophie Scott, ABC News.
New Zealand's Prime Minister has suspended the travel bubble with Australia, saying the worsening outbreak here is clearly not under control. The bubble will be shut from midnight tonight and remain suspended for at least 2 months. New Zealand citizens will be given 7 days of additional time to get home. Jacinda Ardern says the transmissibility of the new variant requires a tougher approach.
There is greater risk now from the Delta variant than there was when we opened the quarantine-free travel arrangement with Australia. COVID has changed, and so we must.
New Zealand authorities will reassess the travel bubble in 2 months. The increased risk of the Delta variant has officials in the United States considering a return of mask-wearing mandates for the fully immunised. The requirement to wear masks was lifted for vaccinated Americans 2 months ago, but surging cases now has health officials rethinking that advice. Around 60% of the Australian population is fully vaccinated. The American population, rather, is fully vaccinated, but the threat of Delta has health officials suggesting the use of masks.
If you are unvaccinated, you should continue to wear a mask and protect yourself against others around you. And more importantly, you should go and get vaccinated to get better layers of protection.
Unvaccinated patients account for 97% of all hospitalisations and deaths in the US. Still to come this evening on ABC News, will UNESCO label the Great Barrier Reef in danger? And later, hundreds of young girls pick up a racket inspired by world #1 Ash Barty's victory at Wimbledon. A man accused of killing a woman whose body was found in a metal box at a Brisbane Riverside apartment has faced court. Talissa Saganto has more from Brisbane.
Yang Zhao was arrested in Sydney earlier this week and extradited to Queensland late yesterday. The 26-year-old is charged with murdering his former housemate Cheong Yen and interfering with her corpse. It comes after the 30-year-old's badly decomposed body was discovered on Monday, wrapped in cloth and sealed inside a large metal box on the balcony of an apartment in Hamilton. Police believe it had been there for more than a week. The Chinese national had been reported missing by a friend in April to authorities in New South Wales after her overseas family were unable to reach her. Investigations into her disappearance led police to search for her in Queensland, where they made the discovery. Police said the body was yet to be formally identified, but her mother had confirmed some jewellery found on her body belonged to Ms Yen. Mr Zhao is currently in isolation in custody and appeared in court via video link from here, the Watch House. His lawyer adjourned the case and he'll return to court next month.
Police in South Australia believe a man from Adelaide's southern suburbs may have been kidnapped, assaulted and ultimately murdered and are appealing to the public for information. Sarah Tomevska reports.
Adelaide man Robert Atkins was reported missing by his mother on the 2nd of January this year after having not heard from her son for more than 2 months. Police believe he was abducted back in November 2020, but his disappearance has only just been declared a major crime. Detectives last night searched a home in Adelaide's south where they believe Mr Atkins was staying around the time he went missing. They believe he was held there against his will and assaulted for up to 7 days before being killed. And they've seized evidence from that house which will form part of their investigation. Now, police say Mr Atkins was involved in Adelaide's street-level drug scene and that he had some small debts owing, and they believe that was the motive behind his disappearance and death. They've ruled out any bikie or gang involvement, but they do believe that at least more than 2 people were involved in his murder.
We're seeking for people to come forward and do the right thing by his family and actually assist the investigation and give some closure to his disappearance and subsequent murder.
Robert Atkins' body still hasn't been found. Police are working to recover it and they're speaking to several people from the house that detectives searched last night. They're also appealing to members of the public who might have seen any suspicious behaviour on Manda Road in Christie Downs around early to mid-November last year to contact police.
The extortionist behind Sydney's collar bomb hoax has interrupted a parole hearing to publicly apologise to his victim. Paul Douglas Peters will be eligible for early release next month after serving his minimum sentence of 10 years in jail. He strapped a fake bomb around the neck of a terrified schoolgirl at her Mossman home 10 years ago. The parole authority intends to grant his freedom, but the Attorney-General has asked for an adjournment. The panel hasn't yet made a decision. No. UNESCO's World Heritage Committee is meeting tonight on a recommendation to list the Great Barrier Reef as in danger. The reef has suffered 3 bleaching events in the last 6 years. Environmentalists say the health of the reef is being threatened from climate change. The Australian government is strongly opposed to changing the reef's listing and has been lobbying for a delay to the decision until 2023. After a year's delay and extraordinary efforts to realise the Tokyo Olympic Games, the opening ceremony is kicking off in the capital tonight. These are the live pictures of the National Stadium in Tokyo, and with the public locked out due to the resurgence of COVID, just hours out from the ceremony, the stadium itself is largely deserted. Across the village and around Tokyo, infections are soaring and there's growing anxiety amongst locals about how secure the Olympic bubble will really be. North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer reports from Tokyo.
This is the Tokyo you won't see on the official opening ceremony coverage tonight. Packed izakayas, Japanese bars filled with people drinking, eating grilled meat and relaxing. For owner Yuka Fujishima, it's open defiance of restrictions from Tokyo's government, but she has no alternative, and across the area many places are in the same situation.
It's been a living hell. They said it's okay to stay open, but then they told people to stay home. The compensation they pay us is small. It's not sustainable to keep our restaurant open.
She closed as requested during the first 2 states of emergency, but during the third and this one, she's stayed open after a ban on alcohol sales put an 80% dent in her revenue.
I want to comply, but we're already in deficit, and we haven't received compensation for 5 months. If I complied, I'd be waiting for my business to go bankrupt, and I've already closed one of my restaurants.
We're starting to see that customers, especially young people, are over it, so it's important to target those people to try to get them to cooperate.
While the Olympic spectacle unfolds around the businesses and residents of Tokyo, it's the struggle of daily life that's really consuming them. While this may be the host city, for many, the Games feel very remote. Outside the National Stadium, people pose with the Olympic rings and feelings are mixed. This woman says she watched the last Tokyo Games on the TV as a schoolgirl and it was a shame she'd have to do the same again. She says she's still looking forward to the Games though. But some couldn't wait to get outside, a crowd gathering to watch an aerobatic display today, a sight health experts feared if crowds were allowed into the stadia, taking 45 minutes to clear. Replicating this across the city for 2 weeks would be just too dangerous.
Dermot joins us now from the National Stadium. Good evening, Jake. What can we expect tonight?
Well, Eliza, I think we'll see a scaled-back, slightly sombre ceremony compared to the ones that we've seen in the past. The buses of VIPs are starting to come in, but they'll be the only ones allowed into the stadium, and it's a beautiful stadium. A couple of hundred people have gathered here on the streets outside to get as close as they can, and the sad thing is this is as close as they'll get for their own Olympics. They are the host city and they will be stuck outside the fence. They're better off watching it on television. In terms of what will happen inside, there will be the ceremony and of course the athletes march. There'll be around 60 Australian athletes who'll be marching. They'll be led by flag bearers Paddy Mills and Kate Campbell, and there'll also be a special honour for Australian pistol shooter Elena Galiabovic, who is a doctor and fought on the front lines against COVID in Australia. She'll be one of the athletes carrying in the Olympic flag to the stadium this evening. In terms of Japan's fight against COVID, there'll be the capital recorded more than 1,300 new infections today. 19 of those are related to the Olympics and 3 of those were athletes, although we don't know their nationalities just yet. Organisers are still confident the Olympic bubble is holding and they're really hoping that once the ceremony takes place here and the sports begin in earnest from tonight, that the unease and uncertainty felt amongst most Japanese shifts to excitement. No doubt a few gold medals will help that.
Jake Sturmer in Tokyo, good luck tonight and have fun. The Star Group has withdrawn its merger proposal with Crown Resorts as a result of revelations at Victoria's Casino Royal Commission. Star says it's abandoning its $12 billion proposal announced in May because of the uncertainty surrounding Crown. The company says issues raised at the Commission have the potential to affect Crown's value, including whether it keeps its licence or the conditions under which it's retained. The Commission has heard Crown is unfit to run its Melbourne casino, with evidence of illegal conduct and an unpaid tax bill of up to $500 million. To finance now and economic trouble ahead as lockdowns extend. Here's Daniel Ziffer.
This mess we're in. The 2 states with the biggest populations, New South Wales and Victoria, are in lockdown, with some regional areas outside of restrictions for now. South Australia in it too, and the list of COVID exposure sites in Queensland getting longer. The gross domestic product of the nation, its GDP, is the value of the goods and services produced in it in a given year. This chart shows you where the powerhouse producers are. Because of our shift to an economy based on services, it's largely where the people are. And with no fast answer to the problems we've got, we'll find out very soon how heavy the hit is. Between income and company tax, it also affects how much the government has to spend. US markets remain near record highs. At home, we inched through the previous mark to set a new one today. Crown shares fell after its main local rival, Star Entertainment, walked away from a $12 billion merger offer. A royal commission into Crown has gone so badly, there's a chance the Victorian state government could rip up Crown's casino licence. Given it's the largest single-site employer in the state, that's unlikely. But if it did happen, Star could pick up the pieces for a lot less. Iron ore back up above $200 a tonne. Truly the pay dirt for Australia this year, even as the strength of our currency dimmed for the weekend. and that's finance.
New research shows the soil-borne disease melioidosis is causing far fewer deaths today than it was 30 years ago. But overall, more cases are being reported, and experts warn climate change will lead to a greater risk of the disease.
Bob Creek fell down a veranda footing, scraping his leg in May 2017.
It was a bit of a muddy hole, and I took some skin off my shin. Nothing out of the ordinary.
But 6 weeks later, despite not being in any pain, Bob's scrape wasn't getting any better, and he was shocked to be diagnosed with melioidosis.
My knowledge of melioidosis was that it was death commonly followed, and I thought at that point I was a candidate.
He's one of a steadily growing number of people who are diagnosed with the disease every wet season. It's caused by bacteria in the soil coming up to the surface after heavy rain and usually enters the body through cuts. The study was led by researchers at Menzies and published today in the Lancet Journal of Infectious Diseases.
When we first started the study, melioidosis was greatly feared in the top end, and particularly by those of us working at Royal Darwin Hospital, because it was causing such high mortality.
Researchers found the mortality rate from melioidosis dropped from 31% to 6% over the course of the study. Overall, the number of cases have been trending upwards, with spikes observed after tropical cyclones.
Professor Curry says 4 key things have led to fewer deaths from the disease: greater public understanding, early diagnosis, access to new treatment, and a high level of care in the ICU. However, he warns that global warming will lead to increased risk factors for melioidosis.
The bacteria will proliferate more because of the combination of things: the warmer temperatures, the greater humidity in the tropics, and more intense rainfall.
Bob Creek is now fully recovered, although his journey back to health hasn't been smooth.
Fatigue and muscle soreness that I felt afterwards for some 2.5 years.
To avoid infection, people in the top end should keep their skin covered near soil and stay indoors during the heavy wind and rain. Lauren Roberts, ABC News, Darwin.
A pioneer of Australian television, John Cornell, has died. A journalist and producer in the 70s and 80s, he helped launch the career of comedian Paul Hogan and was instrumental in setting up World Series cricket. The 80-year-old died peacefully at his home in Byron Bay after a long battle with Parkinson's disease.
After rising through the ranks as a newspaper journalist in Perth, television soon shone its spotlight on John Cornell. As producer of A Current Affair, he scouted for an everyman to provide some comic relief.
Thanks for coming in, Paul, and giving us a hand.
Hello, Mrs. Universe.
Hello, Paul.
And we just sort of hit it off straight away. We were the same type of person. And he said, you know, you shouldn't be doing this. You should have your own show.
He soon got one, and the larrikin partnership of Hogs and Strop was born.
Miss Penelope, I presume.
It was on the Paul Hogan show where he was to meet his wife of 46 years, Delvene Delaney.
It was a match made in heaven, him and Delvene.
Far from being the stupid sidekick, Cornell was smart enough to see an opportunity in cricket, bringing on board dissatisfied players to help revolutionise the game. With financial backing from Nine boss Kerry Packer, World Series cricket brought showbiz to television sport.
Notwithstanding Ian Chappell's ambition and Kerry Packer's money, he was the important influence that brought the two of them together.
Well, he was part of the group that changed the face of cricket, there's no doubt about that.
He also changed the face of Australia in the eyes of American tourists.
I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you.
Millions of tourists came to Australia because of those ads that he did together with Hogs, and he didn't accept 1 cent for them.
The famous ad campaign kick-started the next stage of their double act with the box office smash Crocodile Dundee.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
A Byron Bay local, John Cornell owned a number of pubs in the region and was known for his support for the community. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2001.
To watch Parkinson's disease steal his life is sad, confronting and challenging.
In a statement, his family remembered him as a true egalitarian who sought equity and equality and fought for a fair go.
And it's time for a check of the weather now. Here's Lara Himes.
The cold front moving across the country is bringing cold, wet and windy conditions. This is right across South Australia into New South Wales, Victoria and the southeast of Queensland. All the states have been issued with severe weather warnings for strong winds, and that activity will continue into Sunday when another cold front moves through. That will bring an increase in wet conditions and again strong winds, and there will be heavy snow across the southeast. Victoria to be receiving 500 metres worth of snow. Blizzards are also forecast around the Alpine regions. Tasmania also receiving snow at 700 metres. A look to the capital city wet conditions as you move further south. Also wet conditions for Adelaide. Cloudy in Brisbane and Sydney. Wet conditions for Perth. And a fine day in Darwin with a top of 32.
Here are the top stories on ABC News. New South Wales will not receive any additional doses of the Pfizer vaccine, but the state will speed up the delivery of first doses. The Premier Gladys Berejiklian asked National Cabinet to refocus the vaccine strategy, but the other leaders rejected her request for more supplies. Instead, Prime Minister Scott Morrison says New South Wales will administer more first doses of Pfizer by increasing the time between the two jabs from 3 to 6 weeks. And New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is warning more people will die in Sydney's coronavirus outbreak. 136 new cases were recorded in the state, with at least 53 people infectious in the community. Health authorities confirmed today an 89-year-old man died after contracting the virus. Contact tracing is underway in Queensland's Gold Coast after a person who visited the Dreamworld theme park last week later tested positive for COVID-19. Workers at the theme park who came into contact with the infected person have been told to get tested and isolate. More exposure sites are expected to be added by Queensland Health. And Victoria's Chief Health Officer has sought to assure residents that the state is on track to ease restrictions next Tuesday. 2 of today's 14 new cases were infectious in the community. Authorities are working to track down passengers who were on Melbourne's 86 tram route on Wednesday afternoon. There's an alert for fresh